I've been around the industry for 35 years in optical, and some of the, I try to think of what are the key things that's changing the optical industry itself. You have to start out with number one is over the past 10 years, most of the network equipment suppliers have divested of their optical businesses. And they were put into separate businesses. Some of them were combined with other businesses, and a lot of them went away. But all in all, the R&D expertise that went into optics certainly went down over the past 10 years. And it's very difficult to fund these, so there was consolidations that went on. And you take service providers started the consolidation, the equipment suppliers came next, and component suppliers came third. If you look at it, most of the equipment suppliers now today have preferred suppliers of components. So it's a food chain that's very tightly coupled together right now. The third thing that's happened is, and it's actually, I don't know if you remember, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, we were looking for that killer application to drive bandwidth. Well, the killer application that came in was not one application, it was really competition between the cable guys and the telecom guys, and they started putting broadband access to gain access to those customers. And clearly in 2005 was a major push to get broadband access to as many customers as you could. So that went out. Now when that access went out, by the way, applications started coming to life. And all the PDAs, all the personal devices came out. I'll show you a few numbers on that. But there's another thing, when you talk to the service providers, customers' willingness to pay is limited. So that's going to be the tough spot for the whole optical industry, because we are the ones that provide the capabilities for the broadband infrastructure, but there is a limit in willingness to pay. And there's no limit on the applications and amount of bandwidth they want to eat up. If you take a look at the IP traffic, you're probably tired of seeing this chart, but the key thing I see right now is, I talked to a couple service providers, over half the traffic they're seeing in their networks right now is video. And things like Netflix, YouTube, is just eating up bandwidth at gobs. And 20% of their customers are eating up 80% of the bandwidth. So it's one of these things now that if everybody gets engaged, bandwidth is going to be really expanding. And the number of devices at the bottom is going to be 2 times the global population by 2015. You see it, the ones getting created. So they say the aggregate growth rate is around 32%. Now the networks that support this stuff, one of the things back, again, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, everything was customized. We did custom interfaces in the equipment guys. It was customized and you built the networks around it. That's no longer valid. What's happening now is the optics is pushing closer to the edge. As it pushes closer to the edge, cost pressure comes up, and so does volumes. So you'll see the data guys had it first. If you look in the routers and that, the networks for enterprises, they went to pluggables very fast, and then it went up in bandwidth on those pluggables. The same thing's going to happen in the data, the wide area network deals right now, and you can see that with wireless access, broadband access coming in, wireless backhaul, PONs, certainly in Verizon and other customers, they're deploying those, and then DSL, certainly in the AT&T networks now. So it's broadband access coming in, and it's going to feed in, and somehow optical penetration is going to go closer, but it's going to have cost implications. And cost pressures bring standardization, because what's going to happen is most of our customers want multiple suppliers. They're going to drive the cost down, and as the volumes come up, you're very clearly going to see bandwidth per bit coming down. And the other thing that happens is, and standardizations already started on this. And you can see that we have pluggables coming in now. The telecom industry was probably the last to buy into pluggables. They started with a low speed type stuff, 2.5 gigabits, but now clearly they're into 10 gigabits, and they're going to start to go into the 40 gigabits. And you look at, so the pluggables are populating the network right now. And there's very little today, 40 gigabits and below, that's customized. And I'll tell you the reason why is you can't afford to customize it and design a network around these network boxes. And the other thing that's happening, most people say, well, it's going to be a smooth growth of demand. It's not a smooth growth. What happens is different pieces of the network grow at different points in time. You know, people say, well, if I'm getting a big core in right now, core network, what's happened to the metro side? Well, the metro side will build up, and it just kind of feeds the daisy chain. You can see it when you look at the demand in the marketplace right now. The core is in, you're going to OTN switching, you're putting the ROADMs in the core, and now it's time to go out and get enough data to populate into the metro networks to build that up. And you can clearly see that when you look at, and again, it's different speeds at different points of the network. I know it's probably hard to see with the sun blasting in on, but clearly on the core of the network right now, it's 40 gigabits, 100 gigabits, and off of 10 gigabits, and then the metro is starting to build up into the 40 gigabits, and metro access into 10 gigabits. And then you can see also, when you look at the forecast, and these are different regions, if you look at the blue, that is the sub-cable is the top of the blue. The backbone is the yellow, red is the metro, green is bandwidth management, and the bottom is aggregation. So you'll see different pieces of these grow at different points in time. So one of the things we have to keep in mind is technology will come along and timing will be different depending on where you're going to grow in the network. And so it's going to be very, very competitive. In the data area right now, we're seeing things like with Google and that, the big data centers being created, Facebook and that. The racks of servers are interconnected today to switches with gigabit Ethernet. They're now going into 10 gigabit Ethernet. And the 10 gigabit Ethernet that pairs those up is going to 40 and 100. In fact, they're exhausting very fast. And now what happens is the cost has to come down on these. You see multi-wavelength solutions on the 40 gigabits to drive the cost down, and then you're going to come up to the 100 gigabits going into the outside world. We're seeing clearly a lot of 100 gigabit efforts right now in the routers. This says when we design systems back again, we design customized systems with a fixed capability. That no longer plays. If you talk to the service providers today, they're saying we need equipment that we put in, we can partially equip it, but we don't want to put any more money than we have to into it until the network starts to grow. So if you look at it, the very simple designs we had in the past are going to be fairly complex because they have to have flexibility to keep growing. And you look at the different kinds of applications coming in, you have different line card rates, so you'll plug in a 10 gigabit on one route, a 2.5 on another as you aggregate up. And so it's going to be a variety of speeds that you have off this equipment. So the equipment, the name of the game right now is keep it flexible. And you're going to start to see collapsing of layers. That's already started right now. So the network equipment is going to move very quickly into this flexible structure. You look at the optical component market right now, we took a dive in 2009, and the data says we're starting to come back out. We are coming back out. And the key thing is that the optical networking equipment is about half of what it was at the peak of 2008 right now. So network equipment is going to start to grow. And as it starts to grow, of course, it feeds the component side of the house. And so it's, again, trade-off of investment on the CapEx between the wireless, broadband access, and the core infrastructures. But you can't avoid it. It's going to grow. The other part about this is you can look where it grows. Right now, it's going to be 10 gigabits is the blue, then it goes to 40 and 100 gigabits at the top. And the key thing about all this, everybody says, well, when's 40 gigabits going to take off? It's cost. There's a trade-off of when you'll get maybe 10% of the market if you can't get the cost within, say, in a 40 gigabit range, within 2.5 times a 10 gigabit solution. So you really have to get this down to say each one's going to play in, and as the cost comes down, you'll get the trade-offs, and you pick another solution. Again, I think one of the best things happening to our industry right now is standardization around the modules, and having multiple suppliers of that, and then building optical building blocks that you can share across things. Because the name of the game of our industry right now is get the cost out, because the service providers are not going to get any more money for the more bandwidth that's required. So they want cost per bit to be driven down as fast as they possibly can.